Hi dear audience, Assalamu alaikum. I am Abdul Rashid, lecturer in English at Bahadur Sub Campus Layya. Today we are going to discuss the erasing illusions and memory of move from cultural trauma post 9/11 and 9/11 in the Khakpour's The Last Illusions. First we see an overview of the novel. The novel Last Illusion by Porchista Khakpour, she is an Iranian American fiction writer, revolves around the story of an Iranian-born feral child named Zal, whose demented mother abandons him, horrified by the white color of his skin. Means his mother was very scared of his white skin. Zal's mother considers that she has given birth to a white demon. She was having an underlying fear of the whiteness, the white color, means which is dominantly by the Western world. So there is the inherent tendency of the Oriental tendency that an Iranian mother was afraid of the white color. Therefore, she abandons her. She presents him in a bird cage where he eats insects, seeds from the birds, and squats at the newspaper. Zal is in spite of living with the humans, was not aware of the norms of the human society. So he was basically a very hybrid character. He develops his character as a hybrid one on the biological and social grounds. Later on, he is adopted by the Hendricks, an American behavioralist analyst. Hendricks is basically the symbol of recovery and adaptation. He points out the American tendency of recovery and caring and democratic. But later on we see that even the Hendricks could not properly cure the Zal's behavior. As New York was struggling to come forward to the incident of 9/11, Zal finds himself in trouble as an outsider of the society. His friendship with the famous illusionist Sibler, who claims that he can fly like a bird, keeps Zal's life into chaos. Means there are two characters. Silber is the American illusionist, and Hendricks is the American's behaviorist analyst. So Zal's personality keep dwindling between these two. One is more going to attach him with his past memories, and the other is going to bring him into the world, but he remains in the chaos between two worlds. So he remains at the edge of collision and devastation consistently. The novel Last Illusion is a political allegory in the context of 9/11 and its devastation and the trauma as well. We have adopted the theoretical framework for this study. Fiction writers we see in the post 9/11 times have been writing and attempting for the rememory of 9/11, and there have been the very significant questions that what has caused the incident of 9/11 and how we can come out of this. So there was some fiction writers, including the American writers and the South Asian writers, who have been exploring this theme of hybridity, third space, and erasing illusions that America and the third world cannot come out of this traumatic situation unless they attempt to erase their illusions. These illusions are not only present in the American society, they are also present in the Eastern society as well, as there is a case of the mother of Zal. For the thematic analysis, the theoretical framework we have taken from the Alexander toward the theory of cultural trauma and Kraft's post-colonial witness trauma out of bounds. It means here was a very consistent talk that trauma is a westernized phenomenon, and in the context of 9/11 America was the only victim of this trauma. But by this novel and by this theoretical framework, Alexander and Krapps both has suggested that it would be a serious misunderstanding if we consider the trauma as a cultural trauma as a privileged phenomena of the West or the Western world. So we are bound to see the trauma of the other peoples who are from the third world as well. So in this novel we would be looking at this situation that only Asia, who is an American girl, she is not the victim of chaos, fear and trauma, but the Zal, who is brought to America as a strategy of recovery. He could not recover in even residing in America. Even he could not come to his human understanding of human values. So he also remains triggered between two opposite poles. So this is our mind frame. One is the violence-based version of trauma, where it's more political misrepresentation of the non-Westerns, and Westerns represents the victims as the savage, and they also justify their violence as well. While there is a decolonized version of trauma, which is supposed to be suggested to look that trauma beyond the victim of the West. For example, in this European sense of trauma, Asia was only the victim of this trauma, but later on we see that this trauma is not only limited to the character of Asia, who is the protagonist of this novel as well, but it is also to the trauma of the Zol as well. There is the need to address and to look at the trauma of the decolonized subject, which is the Zol over here in this our study. Here are our major research questions which we are going to explore in this study. How did Porchista Khakpour foreground to erode the memory and illusions of the trauma in the American society in her novel The Lost Illusion, and what strategies Zol did adopt to overcome the trauma imposed on him by the societal or external world in the process of this adaptation? The trauma has been impinged upon him both by the Iranian society as well as his mother forbids him, abandons him on the ground of her previous underlying biases about the color of the whiteness. In the post 9/11 times, there was the emergence of discourse which has been dealing with the fear, fright, and the trauma of 9/11. The initial responses to the fiction has been the focusing on the horrors and the representation of the dominant discourse of nationalism, but later on fiction focused on the agenda of unburdening the construction of cultural trauma of 9/11. Out of that, Alexander is the one. Alexander has traced the relevance of the traumatic situation in the Western and the non-Western, developed and less developed societies. He asserts that it would be a serious misunderstanding if the trauma theory are restricted in its reference to the Western social life only. True, it has been the Western societies that have recently provided the most traumatic apologies for the traumatic episodes in their national histories, but what we are majorly concerned over here, that is that Eastern world and the Western world has some inherent Oriental perspectives. Therefore, they remain both outsider and alien and the strangers to one another. So there is the need to look on the trauma of the characters, whether they are Americans or whether they are the Easterns, and unless until they remain the stranger, until they remain the alien to one another, this situation of trauma is not going to be resolved down. So fiction writers like Porchista Khakpour and other writers like M. Wildman, they have been writing focusing on the trauma of the non-Western societies as well, the peripheral modernity, the trauma of peripheral modernity, and they also have been focusing on the universal sufferers image, where they may rebroadcast to the global audience who see their own potential trauma reflected in the simulations of the modern subject. The process of trauma, it definitely, in spite of out of its new forms and the moral responsibilities, is aimed to redirect the course of political action as well. Means by reading Porchista Khakpour, an American readers can trace out the reasons of trauma which resulted out of the in America as a result of the 9/11 incident of the 9/11. So it would be a very cross-cultural and it would be a very cross-boundaries study, which we would be looking at the trauma of two persons. One is from the America and the other is from the Iran. So we see that in the novel that there is a concept of peripheral modernity of the America. Asia, who is an American girl, she is basically more some sort of fear and she's very afraid of her modernity of the America, and usually she's used to say that what's wrong, relax, it is coming, Zol, it is coming, it is coming, it is coming, it is coming. So repeated cries of Zol, Asia points that she was, even before, as this story is before the happens before the incident of 9/11, but she was in such a traumatic situation that she used to say that it's coming, means tragedy is pending upon her, it's coming. The modern society as America has failed to cope the other rest of the world according to its own modernity, so they have a fear in the mind that one day, as we are the developed one, we are the modern one, and the rest of the world is still in its illusions and in its third wordism and in its backwardness. So definitely tragedy is going to be pending upon the first word as America. Zal gathered as she struggled against him. She felt very hot and her eyes were rolling wildly. What was coming? What was she was going to be pretend that 911? This is 911 is also the helpline of the America, and this 911 is also the very tragic digit for the America as well. She started hissing through all the fourth in her mouth. Where 911 was considered as a symbol of safety, security, providence, at the same time as the rest of the world was not coping with the standards of America, the tragedy was supposed to happen. And then she added that the words that the one had heard all too many times, that was still managed to confirm the worst of him. It is coming, Zol, it's coming for all of us, means the tragedy is coming to all. The novel The Last Illusion alludes the prevailing peripheral modernity in the America, which resulted in the traumatic consequences, where all the characters of novel are the victim of the elimination. Both the characters Zol and Asia were not residing in a homogeneous American society. As we know that America was a multicultural world, even pre 9/11 times, and it badly failed to accumulate, it badly failed to include the people who were not of this culture, means American society was moving on such a multicultural panorama that though they were the nation, but they were not a homogeneous nation, and on the account of this multiculturalism and illusions about progress and the backwardness, they have been prevalent in the society. So the novel Last Illusion visualizes the invisible structural inequality prevalent in the American society. So in this novel we consistently see there is an attempt of from the normalcy and inclusiveness. Peoples are in acute trauma, the people are in acute stress, but they try to move to coming out of this, from the discourse of abnormality to normalcy, and from exclusiveness to the inclusiveness. The dominant image in the novel is the move of abnormality to the normalcy, and the novel is more a political allegory through the strive of Zal. Khakpour asserts that normalcy of the prevailing political situation in America. Khakpour condemns the hypocrisy of the parents to their sons in the parallel to the wider political context, as Zal's mother was very hypocrite to Zal. Similarly, America was also hypocrite to its citizens, means America was privileging some of her citizens and excluding the other ones, as the Khanam is as mother does not show a justified maternal love for her disabled child. And a similar analogy, America does not show a similar pattern to all her citizens. Khanam is discriminatory to her children, and America is discriminatory to her inhabitants who are not in line with the American national behavior. Khanam is entrapped in her own concern. Similarly, America is entrapped in her inter-ethnic closets, which resultantly they have to pass through the trauma. America has to pass through the trauma. Asia is the manifestation of that, and similarly, Khanam has to move from her concerns of trauma, which results in the form of Zal. This novel is more an attempt to decolonize the evaluating trauma industry of the fear and chaos in America. It deconstructs the policing attitude of America to the minorities and raises a sense of awareness in American society. These are the lines from Porchista Khakpour. His father had set it all up and would not have created an abnormal environment for his son, whom Hendrik so badly wanted to grow up as a normal as he could, considering means he was of the opinion that Hendrix was of the opinion that by moving to the America and the New York, Zal would be able to be developed as a normal human. But later on, as American society was divided into many divides, therefore even the American society could not develop Zal as a normal human. The character of Hendrix is more a metaphor of recovery from the abnormality. Hendrix thinks that it would be so great if Zal was just like everybody else, implying that the way Zal lives in such an inconvenience to be able-bodied people like Hendrix, as though being normal is such a wonderful way to live on. Though they tried to make the Zal as the normal one, but they could not. They failed due to the inherent tendency of discrimination, exclusiveness. Khakpour invites us to question whether or not our normal is really as wonderful as we think it. Is Zal better off as a homeless, insect-eating, asexual, bisexual person who is a little strange? Or is he preferable as an alcoholic, sexist man who passes from normal by our standards? Means our standards makes him more tragic. Before moving to the America, he was might be more normal. He might not be more in stress, but when he adopts the American standards, he has to pass through the situation of trauma. Are it more to prove that he is a good father? Why does Hendrix approve of Zal when he behaves in a bird-like manner? Then there is a consistent paralyzed fear of death in the American society. Given these dimensions, and the disappearance of the World Trade Center will not stir the same reaction to the novel's protagonist as it will for its marginal characters. Zal is therefore supposedly closer to the readership in the term of reaction, who already know how the events will unfold. It is precisely this reader's expectation that will be deconstructed in the novel's closing pages. As mentioned previously, with the 9/11 looming, Zal is increasingly more connected to the every side of his identity. Means American world, American social situation makes him more conscious of his identities, and once one becomes more conscious of his identities in relation to the outer world where he is living, then it becomes more segregated. It becomes more confusing one. It becomes more a competitive one. This is a metaphorical way of describing the exasperation of his hybridity in a time when the representative of the center appears more oblivious than ever to what they are about to do experience. In order to experience flight, Zal decides to jump from an aeroplane using a parachute, while exhilarating and undertaking so proves transformative for Zal. Zal wanted to basically come out of these inherent underlying tendencies. Instead of stirring his bird-like instincts, he appears to be more connected to one of the feelings that constitute the kernel of humanity. He was suddenly faced with that most humbling feature of human normalcy. He was paralyzed by his fear of death. What the hell was he doing here? Means in America, though in Iran he was not a human, he was not treated as human, but when he was brought into the society of the humans, he became more tragic rather than in his previous world where he was living in Iran. Zal also becomes aware of the symbolism of the Twin Towers, and when he sees that Zal looks the Twin Towers, he becomes very afraid of it, that what would be happen, approaches them, and later on as he reaches the windows on the World Restaurant, marveling at their impossible height. Means America have moved to an impossible height, which was the height which was going to be seen and viewed by the World Trade Center. Means America has moved to an impossible height, and it could not situate herself with the rest of the world. Therefore, the tragedy was supposed to happen. Zoll is struck by the vertical nature of the towers and their capacity to represent a center around which attention and fascination gravitates. Means America developed herself as a center, but it could not. Always the center has their margins, and the center always is center because of their margins. So when the center excludes its margins, it falls down. Similar was the situation of America, that America as a center has excluded all its margins. Therefore, the tragedy was supposed to be happen. When related to his every dimensions, one may easily comprehend why the promise of height and the verticularity of the twin towers may exert such a strong reaction on the Zoll's part, which permeates the entire sequence set in the space of the windows on the word restaurant. As he becomes accustomed to his surroundings, Zoll's attention gradually drifts away towards the outside world. It means when he was there, while looking in America, he looked back into the rest of the world and experienced that the centrality of his position, a feeling that most of those who went to windows on the world have to be experienced the worst trauma. Zoll focused on what interested him more than the people watching, what was outside the window. On one eye level, there was just the sky, a perfect black sky. It was hard to imagine they were rooting in the ground. He felt so suspended. While living in the American society, he felt suspended, and suspended means in a very in two situation, in the third situation. And thus just below all the lights upon light network of Christmas light, like tangled in descendants of the New York and the Brooklyn and some of the New Jersey. And who knew what more, he felt like he could indeed see the whole world, and that it was actually a window on the world. He felt like he was perched on a narrow branch, and that was just like the slightest inclination he could have up and away into the dark everlasting heavens above the New York. So by this short discussion, we come to see that this tragedy which will plunge into the new colonial metropolis of the world is thus depicted as an unavoidable. The tragedy was to happen, something which diffuses the reaction to the event both in the Asia and the Zoll's case. Means they have not been on the equal grounds and the inclusive one. Therefore, they both have to pass through the tragedy. In spite of all these efforts to quell in the instinctual needs and to enable a sense of relief to calm him down, Zoll finds his existence increasingly challenged in the early days of 9/11. Though tragedy had not happened, but the reaction, Zoll represents the prevailing traumatic chaos in the American society. A brief period of accommodation to life in the New York is turned onto its head. Asia cries, and the difficulty of adapting to the life within a troubled relationship was coupled with the problem of adaptation to a regular life, including the employment. And more we see that indeed there is a sense of defeat appears to pervade the troubled relationship between Zoll and Asia as the events of 9/11 draw near. In spite of Asia's visions and their increasing degree of precision, Zoll does not respond with the alarm or concerns. He just once when he comes to know the reality of the America, then he says that this tragedy is bound to happen, and I'm not going to take it away. I cannot resist this tragedy. I cannot hinder this tragedy. Therefore, by the end of novel, we see him with the laughing. He might be laughing on his own self as well, and he might be laughing on the American society as well. That America still has been pondering on a long ages question that why the Western world is supposed to be the victim of tragedy. So answer is to this question is that as America as the center could not include its margins and the rest of the world, therefore it is supposed to happen. Let it come, let it get Manhattan. whatever it is, you won't see me stopping here. So it shows the listless attitude of Zal, as Zal was not bound to stop that tragedy. It was beyond the limit and bounds of the Zal that he could not resist that tragedy. So by this conclusion, what we draw that unless if America wants to see a happy life and the world without chaos, there is a dire need to erase its illusions, its illusion of a center of the world. America is supposed to erode its memory of the first worldism. America has to erode its illusions in which he has been prevailing. So with this, Porchista Khakpour has attempted that the 9/11 was to happen because of the gap between the center and the margins. And if America wants to needs prosperity, so it has to unbound and erase its prevailing inherent conflicting tendencies. With this, the peace would happen to the world. By this, goodbye. If you have any questions, then you may ask me. I am readily here to answer those questions. Thank you very much.